Now, Felix Lassart is a trusted real estate attorney to President Donald Trump and a member of President Trump's Intelligence Advisory Board. He says Mexico will stop sending oil to energy-starved Cuba. That's one of the moves by the Trump administration. Felix, welcome to the program.
Good morning, Steve. How are you?
I'm good. Now, this week we've heard comments about a deal with Cuba being in the works to provide them with oil. But at the same time, we know that Venezuela's oil stopped flowing to Cuba. We've seen Russian planes in and out of Cuba, not unlike what we saw just before Maduro was plucked out of Venezuela. What's happening? What's the truth on the ground? And what's going to happen with this potential deal, do you believe?
Well, listen, by virtue of geographic location, because I'm in Miami, it's kind of like the hub of the Cuban exile community in the United States. You're hearing a lot of things coming out from the island. I have clients even calling my office wanting to figure out what are the next steps, what's going to happen in Cuba. How do we go in there and rebuild? Cuba is a complicated animal in that in Cuba you have a very high level of poverty, unlike Venezuela. You don't have oil, unlike Venezuela, and you have basically a regime that's been there for 60 years that has completely moved people out of the country and created a gigantic diaspora. So you don't really have an opposition in Cuba. That opposition has to be rebuilt. I believe that this is the first time in any administration, including the Reagan, Bush, Clinton, Obama, any administration, that Cuba has had the pressure from the U.S. government to make wholesale changes. They're feeling it. People are nervous. I get, family members who contact other family members and they tell me that they're scared, that, they don't know what's going to happen. And I think there's a lot of uncertainty in the island right now.
Here's one of the things that I see in the Western Hemisphere. And you tell me, I just saw the elections out of Costa Rica on Sunday. The right-leaning candidate wins the new presidency, a Trump-backed candidate. I see this in El Salvador, Argentina, Chile, Honduras, now Costa Rica. There's a move to the right and away from socialism in a number of countries in the Western Hemisphere. Cuba, like the last holdout, clinging to the idea that somehow communism will prevail, seems to be a losing proposition. Is it possible that Cuba could be free sometime soon?
Steve, I sure hope so. The question becomes what is the U.S. and what are the Cuban people willing to do? America First MAGA really has been about really putting America first and really not having interventions overseas. So the question is the U.S. government going to try to push this militarily in Cuba? I believe that because of the economic regime, the situation in Cuba is so dire that there will be changes that'll take place within the next 4 months because they just can't survive. And no one's coming to the rescue. China didn't come to the rescue of Venezuela. Russia didn't come to the rescue of Venezuela. And I think the same thing with Cuba. The problem is that Cuba doesn't have a soft landing because of the years of that dictatorship in Cuba, the 60 plus years. You have a situation where an entire country has to be rebuilt. So what we have to avoid is to make sure that you don't have a humanitarian crisis, which could happen in Cuba with that regime that is there. And then they'll blame the U.S. for the humanitarian crisis. That's going to be their offensive. That's going to be their spin.
Yeah. I look at one of the members of the Trump administration who is of Cuban descent and doing a remarkably fine job, I believe, Marco Rubio. He obviously has a vested personal interest in seeing this come to fruition, to see Havana freed from the dictators and the communists. I think it's his mission. I do. I think that it's really a personal issue to him and to a lot of people in South Florida. It's true, isn't it?
Look, I think it's definitely a personal mission, because he saw how much his parents suffered, how they had to leave the country, and seen the suffering of the diaspora in Miami, and how things were taken away from them, and the large civil rights abuses. So yeah, certainly Marco feels it at a personal level. But Marco's taken direction, make no mistake, from the top guy, which is Donald J. Trump. And President Trump is the one who's going to decide what's going to happen, how they're going to do it, and Marco's going to follow those orders, and he's doing a tremendous job. And I believe that the Cuban regime certainly feels that he is exerting influence in this situation. And I think if you see the way things are taking place in Venezuela and in Cuba, certainly it has Marco's fingerprint on it. But ultimately, that decision belongs to one man, and that's our president.
Yeah. Be nice to see. Can you imagine that if in one term this president is able to remove the shackles from Venezuela, kick out the drug cartels? You know, you haven't heard of a single drug boat being blown up lately. You know why? There aren't any running around. Pretty simple. If he could free Venezuela, go after the cartels, not just in Venezuela, but in Mexico as well, and bring change to Cuba, what a remarkable transformational president he would be. Last word to you.
Yeah, people don't realize that China has a spy base in Cuba. Russia runs counterintelligence operations out of Cuba. Cuba is a hostile territory. It's been for many years, and has sowed the seeds of dissent and tried to undermine the U.S. every single way they can, whether it's in Angola in Africa, or whether it's in Nicaragua, or in Venezuela. Cuba has always been the arbiter, the catalyst to try to create issues for the United States in this hemisphere.
Yeah. Maybe the Ortegas should be taking note of this. They probably should take note of what's happening in the Western Hemisphere, because they're on the list too. Felix, thank you for being here.
Thanks, Steve. I appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Freedom for the Western Hemisphere. Freedom from interference from China and Russia. This is the Western Hemisphere. This is the Trump doctrine. And it matters. We'll be right back.